What does this have in common with this? Not a lot on the surface, but under the skin, Citroen's luxurious new DS9 has the soul of a Formula E car. Kinda. This latest model is the DS9 E-Tense 4x4 360, with the E-Tense in the title being shared by the DS E-Tense Formula E 2021 car. It's a hybrid with an electrical system inspired by the Street Racer, delivering 360 horsepower. But is it as fast as the Formula E car? That will be a no then. But where it can beat its distant cousin, and indeed a lot of rival cars, is with its luxury. The DS brand, in case you're unfamiliar, is an offshoot of Citroën, and its specific aim is to provide comfort and class on par with Mercedes, BMW, and others in the luxury sector. When they launched the DS brand in 2014, they were inspired by the fact that most of the top 5 luxury brands in the world came from Paris, the likes of Louis Vuitton, Chanel, and Hermes. So DS thought, let's bring a luxury car to the market that embodies that same spirit of luxury. This, you could argue, is like a Louis Vuitton car, if they made one. Now I know it might not look particularly luxurious on the outside, but look closer and you'll see a host of really, really cool touches. Paris is known as the city of lights, so DS went completely nuts with their lights. These actually move, they animate, they rotate when you turn the car on and off. They do a little pirouette, which is French for pirouette. And actually, it serves a practical purpose because they have several different driving modes. They have a town mode with a nice wide beam to illustrate your surroundings, a country mode with a more concentrated beam, and then a motorway mode with a long concentrated beam in order to help you see exactly where you're going. Plus, looks amazing. Apparently, DS's cars also take inspiration from the world of fine watchmaking. This embossed strip on the bonnet is called the sabre, and if you look closely, you'll see it has a very specific pattern called a guillochage, or clos de Paris. This particular pattern was designed by a man called Monsieur Briguet, who has a very fine shop in Paris, and they make amazing watches. Look them up. There's some very interesting detail along the sides and at the back as well, starting with these door handles which pop out to greet you. Very nice. And also it's got a charge port on the left-hand side as well as your petrol port on the other, being a plug-in hybrid. Plus on the C-pillar, it's got these lights up here at the top which reference the old design you found in the original DS. Plus around the rear, these very intricate rear light clusters, probably inspired by something Parisian and very avant-garde. The DS9 also has a nice cabin. This particular model will compete for space with the Mercedes E-Class and BMW 5 Series and offers comparable comfort. It arguably has more flair than the Germans too, more playful and avoiding the minimalist approach taken by its contemporaries. The materials in the cabin are worth talking about as well because they're actually very, very premium. Look at this stitching, for example. This is called pearl stitching, which gets its name from the fact that it looks like lots of little pearls. Now, historically, that's only been possible if you stitch this by hand, but DS have figured out a way to stitch this using machines, and it does look pretty cool, I think. Not everything in this cabin is stitched by machines though. The stitching on the steering wheel, for example, is done by hand, presumably because it's a much more complex shape, and it adds a little touch of humanity to the cabin, shall we say. As for practicality, this is DS's longest model, which means more than adequate rear space, plentiful leg and headroom, good rear technology for passengers wanting to be driven around, and of course, lots of luggage space. As with all hybrids, the level of storage is reduced slightly due to the electrical and all-wheel drive components, but they're still in the region of 500 litres on offer. Now, at this point, we'd normally go and drive it on the public road. But I couldn't ignore the fact that there was rather an empty racetrack just sitting there. And DS do say the car has the spirit of a Formula E racer. So, when in Rome, or France, so Citroëns are well known for their comfort, and the DS being a cousin of Citroën and the DS9 being the flagship of the DS range is very comfortable. They've tried to give it as strong a chassis as possible in order to minimize vibrations, and all around you've got acoustic laminated glass, both in the windscreen and also in the side window. So inside, very serene, really is. I mean, if you want it to be serene, because this car also has a 14-speaker focal stereo system, which I've listened to earlier, and I can tell you, it's pretty decent. Is it up there with the likes of Mercedes and BMW in terms of refinement? Do you know what? I'd say it is. Based on this evidence, yes. It's quite comfy as well. The old school DSs were famous for their hydro-pneumatic suspensions, and although this doesn't have that, this does have some clever suspension of its own. It uses active scan technology, a camera just in front of this rear view mirror, so it's quite playful, to scan the road ahead and actually detect where there might be imperfections in the road. And if it finds any, it slackens off the dampers to give you as soft and as plush a ride as possible. So it works a lot like the systems that you might find in Mercedes and in Audis, and it's I mean, I'm on a racetrack, so it is buttery smooth, but I'll tell you what, it is a very, very plush feeling car. The steering is very light, it's reasonably direct. There's actually a little bit of feedback in there. It's wet underfoot, but I can actually feel when I'm losing a little bit of grip at the front end, and that gives me a lot of trust in the front end of the car. And remarkably, the back end feels very playful. It has the same chassis as a Peugeot 508, but it was re-engineered by the guys who were responsible for the Formula E car, and you can feel that inert playfulness in this thing. It's surprisingly playful. The powertrain is probably the most interesting thing about this version of the DS9. It uses an inline 4-cylinder engine with 2 electric motors, 113 horsepower on the front and 110 at the rear. Together, the most they can make is 360 horsepower. Now that's not massive, but it does have a decent turn of speed. You put your foot down and it does fly towards the horizon. Not in a way that keeps your eyes on stalks, but in a way that definitely helps you make decent progress. And then when you get into a corner, that back end does like to step out on you if that's what you want. It's a fun car.
Being a plug-in hybrid, this DS9 can be driven in electric-only mode. It has an 11.9 kilowatt-hour battery pack that allows for just under 30 miles of EV-only motoring and speeds of up to 86 miles an hour, ideal for shorter commutes. When fully charged and used in conjunction with the internal combustion engine, DS reckons it emits 41 grams per kilometer of CO2 and can deliver 156 miles per gallon, although not the way I'm driving it today.
What are the brakes like? It's quite a heavy car, this thing. It's got 380mm discs at the front, 290mm at the rear. They're bigger discs than you find on the smaller engine variety of DS9, and they are pretty effective. Even in the wet, it does bring the car to a stop. But the more you lean on them, the more they start to complain. This is definitely not a track car, but if they've given it the same name as a track car, then I think I'm within my rights to pound around the racetrack. Why not? Plus, who's going to stop me? If there's one thing I'm not keen on in this car, I'd say it's the gearbox. You've got these flappy controls behind the steering wheel, but it's not snappy, it's not responsive, and it doesn't seem to want to give you the exact gear that you want. But you got to remember, this is a luxury car. It's not really built for this, despite the fact it has the same name as the Formula E car. The good thing though is that when you leave the thing to its own devices, it does shuffle up and down the box in a pretty smooth, unintrusive way, which is exactly what you want in a luxury car. So what do I think of this thing? Do you know what? I really like it. This is a very unusual way to test the DS9 E-Tense 360, but I think it's acquitted itself better than I might have expected. It's comfortable, it's plush, even when you're hammering around at 8 or 9 tenths. It gives me a good feeling inside as well. This is a nice cabin. It's got a decent turn of pace to it. And perhaps most impressively of all, it's a fun thing to drive. Would I pick this over a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes E-Class? Do you know what? I like to think I'm not a sheep. So yeah, I would definitely consider it. Well done, DS.